Hypnosis Expert Live. Hi, everyone. We're here with Jordon Wolf today, Captain Jordon Wolf from the U.S. Army. And Jordon, your official title is a other than Captain LLC. Is that what they call it? Something like that.
I'm an LCSW, Licensed Clinical Social Worker.
That's it. There was too many letters for me to remember. Okay, and Jordon, many years ago, I don't remember, I don't exactly remember when it was, but many years ago, you trained with us and became a hypnosis instructor as well.
Correct.
And that's basically, we're not going to talk too much about it being an instructor, but as a result, you do hypnosis, and you do hypnosis with the military quite often. And the basis of this talk today is to hear about what you're doing, helping people with PTSD. And as you get talking, you probably saw the advertising. We advertise Captain Wolf's magical chair. So you're going to talk about your magic chair program, and also understand you use sight and sound machines, and I want to hear all about that.
I've been a clinical social worker this is my 20th year as a clinical social worker. I've done hypnosis probably since the early 90s. I've been certified in 2 different schools of thought for hypnotherapy, and then a certified instructor, as Rene said, for many years now. Actually, several people who pop on here now and then, Elynne being one of them, was one of my students. So it's something I hold very passionate about. And being an LCSW level, it's the highest level, clinical level you can have as a clinical social worker. But I'll tell you, for hypnotherapy, I do things with hypnotherapy that would take a great deal longer doing regular chair therapy, as we say. So it's terrific. But as we talk about PTSD, and I'll get into that just a little bit, the biggest thing I'll say, and just to kind of remind people, symptoms of PTSD and as a diagnosis is a pretty serious diagnosis. So recognizing that not all hypnotherapy or hypnosis practitioners are therapists, just, remember, we always want to work within the scope of our practice. And I can't say that enough because, it's super easy to be working with someone, open up that can of worms, and not have the skills in your toolbox to be able to deal with what's inside that can. So I just kind of say that respectfully. If this is a population of people that you want to work with directly, educate yourself, learn about PTSD. It's a great population. They definitely need our help. But just, before you delve into that, make sure that you educate yourselves in the area because there's a lot of information here. And you don't want to cause, obviously, more harm than good. So I just kind of put that one out there. If I can just get into just the signs and symptoms of PTSD just a little bit. I don't want to make this a diagnosing class. There's so much material on PTSD and the treatment of PTSD. I actually just completed a cognitive behavioral therapy class specific to suicidality, but also with PTSD. That's an 8-hour class. So remember here, we're talking, 45 minutes? So it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, you guys. I'll give you as much information as I can in the short period of time that we have, but, there's a lot here. So for signs and symptoms with PTSD, it's grouped into basically 5 different clusters: stressor, intrusion symptoms, unpleasant changes to mood or thoughts, avoidance, and then changes in reactivity. And I'll highlight each of those, and I'll talk a little bit about how hypnosis can help with those things, and then some of the work that I've done, and then I'll touch on the Captain Wolf's magic chair a little bit too. So when you think about stressors, PTSD starts from a traumatic event. So it's exposure directly to a traumatic event. It could be exposure indirectly to a traumatic event, or it could be witnessing someone else's trauma. Any of those things could be one of the stressors that triggers PTSD. There's intrusion symptoms. So per the DSM, everyone who would qualify for this diagnosis would have one of these things, whether it be exposed to the trauma and then re-experiences the trauma in one or more of the ways, like flashbacks, nightmares, distressing or intense memories, or distress or physical reactions after being exposed to those reminders. Those reminders are known as triggers. So a trigger could be considered, as we talk about in hypnotherapy, like almost like an anchor point. But a trigger would be a negative anchor point, right? And in hypnotherapy, we choose to use positive anchor points. Kind of like when we talk about helping somebody with smoking cessation, we say things like, anytime you have the thought of smoking, you'll get thirsty and you'll want to drink water. You're not going to tell somebody anytime you have the thought of smoking, you're going to get nauseous and vomit. You'd have a bunch of vomiting patients, right? So we choose positive triggers, when we do hypnotherapy. But when people have PTSD symptoms, it's almost like they have a negative trigger to the event. And that could be things like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, leading into nightmares or negative thoughts or thinking or those kinds of things. The third thing is unpleasant changes to mood or thoughts. So there's two of these things that are required for the official diagnosis. Could be things like blaming self or others for the trauma, decreased interest in things that were enjoyable, negative feelings about themselves or the world, inability to remember the trauma clearly, which is super common, difficulty feeling positive, feelings of isolation, or negative affect, difficulty feeling positive. Avoidance. This occurs when a person tries to avoid reminders of the trauma. So avoiding external reminders of what happened, avoiding trauma-related thoughts or emotions, sometimes using drugs or alcohol to self-medicate. Avoidance is a big thing with PTSD, and it can really keep people away from doing things that in their lives that they might otherwise like to do. For example, traveling, modes of travel, maybe as a result of PTSD, their panic and anxiety prevents them from getting on an airplane. Well, that significantly limits their ability to travel and go places and enjoy life. That's just one example, but there could be many examples of avoidance that gets in the way of someone in their lifestyle. And then the last thing is changes in reactivity. Things like people becoming more easily startled or reacting to frightful experiences, things like aggression or irritability, hypervigilance, hyper-awareness, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, heightened startle response. All those things are very, very common for people that suffer from PTSD. Any questions on any of that so far? I'm trying to stay real time sensitive and rapid fire. So
you're doing good. We're waiting for that magical chair.
It's coming. It's coming. So when we think about how hypnosis can help people with these symptoms, we know that hypnotherapy cannot erase a traumatic event, right? Under hypnosis, I can't erase a memory, but what I can do is help somebody process that situation differently. So I work for the VA, in the VA and in the DoD as my job as an Army social worker. There's a couple of different really endorsed modalities of treatment. One of them is prolonged exposure. And what prolonged exposure does is it allows someone the opportunity to really explore the traumatic event in a safe environment, to be able to go through every single detail of the event and where they were in that event, how it affected them, how they affected the event. So you don't have to necessarily negatively put your own bits of information in there to put a negative spin on the situation, how maybe I could have done something better or worse, or what I had done to affect that situation. So we know that trauma affects the limbic system, the fight or flight or freeze, right? So when we're exposed to traumatic events, usually our body falls back into one of those three things, fight, flight, or freeze. So how does hypnotherapy help? Hypnotherapy can really look at any negative conclusions or beliefs in the situation and allow the person to release or transform the negative belief system. So we can explore the situation for what it is instead of what we see it as being. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Intrusion, things like nightmares, flashbacks, distressing memories, and reactivity. Those are the most common ways in which trauma really comes into effect regular daily life. So what do we do to deal with that stuff? In a hypnotherapy session, we give people tools and resources and the opportunity to use that stuff to take back that sense of control. So we call it ego strengthening, right? Where we use our script work to do those kinds of things and remind people, like my favorite script out of all of the hundreds of scripts that we can use in hypnosis has to do with self-love. Elynne probably remembers that one. I use that one a lot because how easily it is for us to lose that part of self-love and self-worth when trauma hits. So by doing this, we are able to use things like Emile Coué's physical anchor. If no one is familiar with Emile Coué, he wrote a great little book, and one of the things he really focuses on in physical anchors. When I teach hypnosis and hypnotherapy and I work with my clients and patients, it's super simple to teach something as simple as touching your first finger and thumb together and saying, every day in every way I'm getting better and better. It pulls a physical anchor for an emotional response to help people get through these things. No different than a mantra. It's a super simple thing, and what I like about that is you can do it anywhere, anytime. You could do it behind your back in an elevator and say it silently to yourself, and nobody knows what you're doing. But it's an easy anchor to bring yourself back into a state of calm or relaxation and create some really incredible healing. That mind-body connection, as we talk about a lot with hypnotherapy, is super, super helpful. We can really take advantage of that subconscious mind and anchor that in there and provide self-healing. Avoidance is a big deal. So the purpose of avoidance is to attempt to distance oneself from the trauma, but in doing so, you also distance yourself from the healing process, right? What results with that is that fragmented sense of self. So being able to pull somebody back in from avoidance and address some of these things and kind of like expose irrational fears. I have a great irrational fear that I used with someone. So we do a lot of things with fear-based anxiety. I like to use regression therapy. My favorite case probably of all time was a gal I was working with. She was in her 40s. All she wanted to do was get on an airplane and go to Vegas with her family. Every time she traveled, they had to give her copious amounts of sedatives to be able to get on an airplane. She couldn't even drive through a car wash. Her anxiety of small spaces was so high, she would pull up to the car wash, get out, walk to the other side, and her husband would drive through. And then she would get in on the other side. So in working with her, we always do regression to the initial sensitizing event. Well, for her initial sensitizing event was she was about 2 years old. She was going into the closet to play with her mother's galoshes. The door closed behind her, and she was stuck in the dark closet. So as a 2-year-old, is that scary? Sure, of course that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
But as a 45-year-old, is it scary to be in the closet? No. Whose closet is it? It's your closet. Whose things are these in your closet? Put your hands out. Feel the things in the closet. Whose coats are those? Well, there are coats. Whose shoes are they? There are shoes. All right, can you see where the light switch is? Yes. Can you imagine yourself turning the light switch on? Yes. Is the closet dark anymore? No. Is it still scary? No. Now 45-year-old you, join with 2-year-old you. Hold hands. Look at the situation. Is the situation still scary? No. And like a series of dominoes, you've just essentially destroyed everything that is attached to that traumatic event. So being able to go back and really explore that situation, because yes, was my focus military trauma? Yes, but people have all kinds of traumas. For her, at that 2-year-old trauma of being stuck in the closet, carried with her for almost her whole life until she had someone who sat with her, walked her through the process, examined it, and really identified that those fears were no longer valid, and being able to walk through that. So when the work is done in trance, it changes the way the memory is stored, and then the way it functions in the body and the mind, and then clients aren't held hostage by it anymore. Because isn't that true? We're kind of held hostage by our past traumas, whatever the trauma is. And if you think about that personally, all the different things that we go through in life, it's super easy to be held hostage by your past. But isn't that how hypnosis works? Freedom. It frees people from their past hurts, traumas, angers, relationship issues, whatever the thing might be, to be able to walk them through forward to be the person that they really want to be and achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So ultimately, first and foremost, trauma changes us. We know that. Traumatic events change the way you look at things. Somebody said to me before I deployed to Afghanistan, Jordon, you have everything in your bag of tools that you need to do the job you're going to do in Afghanistan. You're going to work with people, you're going to help people, but just know that you're going to be exposed to things that's going to change you. It's not good, it's not bad, it just kind of is what it is. And I thought, my strong, tough self, hearing that, maybe you haven't heard, but I'm Captain Wolf. I'm kind of a big deal. No, I'm not. And yes, 100% it changed me. But did it change me for the bad? No, I use those experiences to propel me forward. But when you deal with traumatic events, it definitely is going to change you. It's going to change how you look at things. But how you develop the tools to look at those items, well, that's a different story. That's up to you. So being able to use hypnotherapy or whatever tools you use to be able to process the trauma, deal with it, and use it as a positive to move forward, that's where we come in to be able to help people to do that. So clients can then begin to change the distorted belief system, reclaim the part of them that was lost, and develop that positive thought process to move forward and heal. So I didn't talk a little bit about arousal. Trauma that's stuck in the body, we know it's going to work its way out some way, right? That's how mental trauma works. Whether it be consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, we know that it's going to work its way out some way. If you don't do something with it, it can manifest in chronic shock, somatic or physical illness, arousal symptoms, hypervigilance, startle, problems sleeping, concentrating, any of those kinds of things. Those are all the negative responses to the arousal process. So it's useful to look at the arousal symptoms as a way in which the body's trying to heal, get our attention, and do something about it. So when people come to you with those kinds of things, okay, let's look at that. Those are symptoms. Now we have to go back and figure out how are we going to work with things. Now, I do a lot of things with symptom management. This is a great transition to talk about the magic chair. So in the Army, I'm actually, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a board certified diplomat in social work, but I'm also credentialed in the military to utilize hypnosis. And one of the things that I did was I used hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and a light and sound machine. So when people have sleep issues don't just boom happen and then they don't ever happen again. Sleep issues usually are the course of things over the course of time, and people don't usually do anything about it until it's distressing to them. So with hypnosis, we know that we can get people in different levels of brainwave functioning, right? The alpha, beta, theta, delta. So if I can talk to someone who is having sleep issues, typically what's happening is they're having interrupted sleep from bad dreams, or they're not getting into REM because of hypervigilance, being in a deployed environment. You're always kind of on your game, sleeping with one eye open, as they say, or head in a swivel, because you have to really be cognizant of your environment. And when you stay in that situation for an extended period of time, it's habitual, right? Sleep is habitual. We develop habits, and then getting out of that habit is difficult. So people never really get to that REM sleep. So they end up having interrupted sleep or issues with sleep, and then they sleep for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is at a period of time. So under hypnosis, being able to break that cycle, get them down to REM sleep, and it's almost like rebooting the machine. It's like, when you shut your computer off and turn it back on again, all of a sudden it starts working better and faster and not having errors. Well, our minds aren't much different than that, right? So it's breaking that cycle and getting them into that REM sleep, and then they come out of trance and they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this relaxed in a long, long time. And then all of a sudden they sleep. So when I overseas, I would use something called a light and sound machine, which is like a big set of glasses with LED lights and then headphones, and we know that each level of brainwave function correlates to a frequency. Well, light transmits in frequency, and sound transmits in frequency. So if we're able to pulse light at specific frequencies, and you're able to pulse sound at specific frequencies and tones, you can actually draw the mind down into different levels of hypnosis. That combined with me talking with them was a really, really helpful, powerful tool. So no different than if you think about it like this. We're talking right now on this video cast. I start, all of a sudden you hear me snapping. That's what you're focused on now. It draws your attention away from me over here. Well, that's exactly how light and sound works, right? It's pulsing light and pulsing sound, and it's drawing your mind into that lower level of brainwave function. Super helpful in rebooting the cycle and getting people into deeper levels of hypnosis or trance, and even pushing them into sleep. So I would do that in something called the zero gravity chair. If you've not used the zero gravity chair, it really looks quite simple. It looks like a fancy lawn chair, really. You can buy them at sporting goods stores. They're very economical. I use them in my private practice, especially when I travel. But something about that chair, you get that sweet spot as you push someone into that place of zero gravity, as they call it, and they feel kind of like they're floating. So that combined with light and sound and a little bit of hypnotherapy, they used to call it my magic chair. So anytime my soldiers were having a hard time, they would say, go see Captain Wolf and sit in his magic chair, and he'll fix you right up. And I did. So I helped a lot of soldiers on deployment, and then, of course, I carry that into my private practice and use that as well. All of these things are all tools that we use as practitioners, right? So not everything is for everybody. It's all about taking the time in your pre-talk and your assessment of that person to find out where they are, how willing they are to go wherever they need to go to get the result they want to get. And as we know, when you're working with people, the regression work can be very, very painful, very emotional, very exhausting. And for us as practitioners, we have to be calm and settled dealing with it. But we also have to remind people, hey, remember, I'm here with you. You take all that time on the front end to build that rapport with them, to establish yourselves as experts in the area, to act with confidence as providers and practitioners, because you're the one that's going to help them deal with this. You have to be that safe place for them. So you establish yourself as that safe place, and remind them of that throughout the sessions. Don't forget, take a deep breath. Each breath you take reminds you that you're in a safe place, in a safe environment, and I'm the one that's going to help you deal with this and move you forward. And you continually reinforce that throughout your sessions with them. This is not something necessarily that you're going to resolve in one session. It may take several sessions to work with someone, and that's okay. The most important part is that from the beginning, you're giving them tools and resources and help for symptom management. They're going to start feeling better right away. But it's going to the lasting results take a little bit of time to work with them. I've helped people in 3 sessions. I've helped people in 5 sessions. But that gal that couldn't get on an airplane and go to Vegas, in 4 sessions, she was on an airplane going to Vegas. Just saying. I should have sent her to you, Elynne, when she got there. So at any rate, that's the meat and the potatoes of my talk. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have, and I'll turn it back over to you, Rene.
Great. Well, thank you, Jordon. I'm getting feedback from myself here. Let me go ahead and... There we go. We have some questions coming on. And first of all, we have James Michael that said, hey, you look good, buddy. You able to hear me still, Jordon?
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I lost you. You got real quiet.
Okay, I'm getting a... There we go. I get that on mute now. Yeah, we have James Michael that came on and said hi to you. I believe he was one of your students.
He was. Hi, James. Nice to see you.
And let's see, Carlos Bustabad. He says, Captain Wolf, do you use RRT as a protocol? It's basically hypnosis for PTSD. And how about eye movement therapy?
I'm not certified in EMDR, although that is one of the evidence-based practices that both the DoD and the VA choose to use. I'm actually exploring getting certified in that this upcoming year.
Okay, great. Now, is that what the RRT is?
I'm sorry, asking me or him?
You.
I'm not
You can't
familiar with
answer me.
that. I'm not familiar with that as an acronym, so no, I do not use
Okay.
use that.
Now, how long is your average session for PTSD?
So usually session number one is a little bit shorter, probably 45 minutes to an hour, because it's more focused on building rapport, establishing hypnosis, setting up for the next session so I can use faster inductions so I can get more into the work. So probably session one is around 45 minutes. Session two is usually every bit of an hour. And remember, session one, I'm doing a little bit more rapport building and those kinds of things, getting someone comfortable in hypnosis, and then setting myself up for, and next time we achieve hypnosis, you're going to do it much faster than the time before. Sometimes as simply as just placing my hand over your hand using like a Dave Elman induction, and just sleep, and getting someone in, doing deepeners, and then doing things like ego strengthening on the front end, and then getting into the regression work, which sometimes you kind of feel like Columbo, right? You're getting in there and you're asking questions and they're answering, and sometimes you don't know the journey. You don't know where they're going to take you necessarily. You just have to be willing to act on your feet and and be able to go through that. So session 2 and 3 and into session 4 can be an hour, sometimes a little bit longer. Always, always, always try to find an end point of your session and end on a high note. So if that means, like for me, I like using a self-love script, which is super fluffy and warm and fuzzy, and it ends the session with a nice big hug, so to speak, and then it sets yourself up for a positive experience because it's hard work, right? So you want to end on a positive experience, so when you come into the next session, they're feeling good about the work that you're doing with them.
You don't want them leaving in a bad state.
Right, absolutely.
That's not what they need at all. So, yeah. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, my volume has seemed to take a dip, but I'm listening. I gotcha.
Now, from what I understand, I might be off. Using hypnosis like you do in the military for PTSD isn't something that's been around for an awful long time, is it? It's not across the board. I mean, I was in the military a few years ago, before your time, and there she is laughing. Okay, and I went to VA hospitals for back then it was PTSD counseling for a few years. And I remember the end note was, "You're okay now." And I was like, "You mean I don't have PTSD anymore?" And they said, "No, you're okay. You're happy. We're going to let you go." There was like no cure at the time. They were just helping you to leave on a high note. And with hypnosis, there actually is one. And that's the beauty that I see you're doing. You can actually cure them rather than giving them a Band-Aid and wishing them on their way,
Right. And isn't that the case for most things with hypnotherapy? Where hypnotherapy sometimes doesn't necessarily worry about why we fix the problem. We just know that we do.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like some 20 years later, someone used hypnosis in a session and PTSD gone. And it's been, since then, you can see how long ago, since then, it's been 20 years since, and I still haven't had problems. So,
right.
Yeah, that's a very powerful tool. Right.
And I would say across the board with medical care, period, they're probably over the last 10 years really starting to amp up their willingness to look at alternative therapies. Even though hypnosis has been accredited for the American Medical Association for a long, long time. And in Europe a little bit longer than that.
Even though it shouldn't be called an alternative therapy.
But it is. I mean, you
Yep.
look at hypnotherapy and Reiki and healing touch, and there's countless different types of alternative therapies. It's amazing. The biggest muscle we have in our body is the mind, but hypnosis is an alternate therapy. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do have a question. Jordon, how does it affect you in your personal life working with so many negativities and having such an important role in other people's lives?
Well, I think I look at it a little bit differently maybe than some. I'm afforded the opportunity to be able to help people in some of the hardest times. When I look at it like that, I kind of always leave the hero. So to me, I look at it the opposite of what you're saying. Does that mean that I'm still human? There's the case here or there that I still need to take the opportunity to maybe process a little bit. I'm afforded the opportunity to have a lot of support myself. So, for example, I mean, it wouldn't be out of character for me to call, Rene or you, Elynne, or someone else, in my field to say, hey, can I just process this case with you? I'm working with this person. Here's the situation. No different than if I get stuck in a case, because as much as I've been doing this for a long time, we all come across that case where, we might not know necessarily where to proceed. So it's sometimes, or maybe, gosh, I did this, it worked out really well, but what could I have done better? And I think as a community of hypnosis practitioners, it's really important that we do have that support network. But I'm lucky to be able to do what I do on a day-to-day basis and feel pretty good about it every day.
Okay.
That's awesome.
I'm glad to hear that.
Anything else? Let's see. No, where the questions are. Oh, the RRT I mentioned earlier is Rapid Resolution Therapy. Thank you, Carlos. I didn't know what that was, and now I know. Any other questions from anyone before we get going?
I got something that's it's just a curiosity, I think. But with the light and sound machine, is the sound part? Do you use like binaural beats and isochronic tones and that kind of thing, and like the different waves, theta, delta, that kind of thing?
Yes. So the point is, it starts, at alpha and steps them down.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different types of machines out there. They all do essentially kind of the same type of thing. Again, now, if you're dealing with someone with PTSD and military trauma, the light may be more distressing. So sometimes I just use the sound and not the light, or other way around, depending. Again, if it's a veteran, they might have tinnitus. Many veterans experience tinnitus, which is the ringing in the ears. So sometimes you have to do a little trial and see what works and what doesn't, what's pleasant to them. Sure. And what isn't. But I've had pretty good results with using light and sound.
Yeah, that's good. Because now I use it in my recordings, because I do recordings online.
Okay.
But I would never thought of, well, I wonder if starting the recordings in alpha and then kind of just changing it down. I don't know, maybe that's something, but I just thought that was, yeah, I'll try it. Learn something new.
There's actually a lot of music you can get online too that has it in there. I think, Raluca, you remember years ago we had one. It was, the name of the CD was called Theta Relaxation. And it was beautiful music, but there were the binary beats, and just listening to the music alone would bring you right down into theta.
That's what I have. I have the combination. It's some music, and it has isochronic tones and theta binaural beats.
Well,
incorporated.
Adobe has a program. It's called Adobe Audition. It's pretty robust. It's actually the program that I was using to make my CDs, and it allows you to put different tracks So you would record your voice track, and then you'd have your music track, and you mix it all together, right? You could easily put in along your session, the different depths of hypnosis in a subtle tone in the backdrop.
Yeah.
Speaks right to the subconscious.
Good to know. Thank you.
I remember that same company that made the theta relaxation also made a delta one. Boy, was that strange. Delta was not like the theta. You listened to it, and it was
Delta sounds very different. Yeah.
It was really freaky. Yeah, it was.
It's a little off-putting when I listen to it. I'm like, oh, I don't feel really at ease.
Yeah, it's overkill anyway. Theta's all you need.
But remember, you don't hit that on the front end, right? So you're not really at the awake state when you're listening to that. Normally, you'd be down in the basement.
Yeah. And I suppose if you're in alpha and somebody's playing delta, that's kind of like, someone a block away and you're trying to move to that area instead of somebody that's sitting right next to you and you're just shifting over a little bit. So it's a lot more. I suppose if that space between those states is so distant, your mind may just go, never mind. I won't bother going over there.
Right.
So that's good to know.
Now, Jordon, you were saying about how a lot of them have difficulty with sleeping and problems with dreaming. Now, I know most things, such as PTSD, is stored in the theta brainwave state, what we call the amnesia state, because one of the ways the mind likes to help you is by making you forget things. Could that be a reason why they're having difficulty with dreaming? Because theta is also the dream state, plus delta is beyond dream. There's no dream. So if that's the only dream state and that's where everything's stored, there must be one heck of a fight, And
I think that's the premise of some of that prolonged exposure work, or as we do it in regression work, is being able to get back into that memory, because we know hypnosis can access those memories laser specific, right? So we can use regression work, get back into that situation and really examine it. One of the symptoms of PTSD is not being able to remember the situation clearly. Because of the trauma, it's that protection phase of trying to protect us from the situation. So if you can use regression work to get back in there and really examine it for what it is, it brings all of that stuff to light.
Great. We have another question here. Do you use NLP as well in your treatments?
I don't. I've used some of that script work. It's very interesting, but that's not my primary focus. No.
Okay, because I know a lot of the hypnosis you were taught in our class, we don't specifically label because NLP is hypnosis, but you're taught a heck of a lot of NLP, and Elynne's realizing that now because she's becoming an instructor. There's quite a bit of NLP in the course, but we just don't break it down. This is NLP, right. This is that, this is this. So you're probably using it without knowing it. You're using it without knowing it.
I recognize it in the anchoring.
Do you? Great. Well, Jordon, we would like to thank you for coming, and it's been very informative. I appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn from this. And one thing you said at the beginning, and I was reminded in an email this morning, because of the email that I sent out that you were coming, that you need to work within your realm of practice. So when you're dealing with this, there's a difference between working with PTSD or treating PTSD. If you're treating, you should have a medical or mental health degree because you don't want to cause more harm than good. So it's important that you work within your realm of practice. So this information here is just to help you to understand, to give you a helpmate some things to think about. If you have friends that have PTSD and you want to refer them to treatment, be sure you refer them to someone who has the credentials to be able to do it. And everyone here is thanking you online. I can see that. And Karen New just came on. Carlos, Royce are all saying thanks. So they appreciate everything. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for showing up. And we will see you all next week, same bat time, same bat station. And give you folks all a chance to say goodbye, and we will head out.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you,
Jordon.
Jordon.
It was a great experience. I got a lot out of that.
Excellent, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be connected into the community, and I'll be teaching again here real soon in the Chicagoland area. So, anybody in the Midwest who's looking to get certified, send them my way.
There we go.
And he's a wonderful teacher.
Midwest there, West Coast there, East Coast here. We're all set.
Another Midwest.
And we're going to have to work on Anthony to be up in the North teaching.
Come on, Anthony. Go for it.
You will teach. Somebody put on some binary beats right now. You will teach.
Maybe I will.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So long.
Bye, Raluca.